Hello everyone, I am here today to talk to you about the Fast ForWord program for students with dyslexia and who are learning English. My name is Joyce Cairns and I have been working with the Fast ForWord program for 10 years. In that time I have worked both directly and indirectly with over 7,000 students. I'd like to start by introducing you to my little man here called Luca, and I'd like to talk about the learning timeline. Now, when we start to learn English, we start by listening to the sounds and we start by listening in general. This is followed by listening comprehension, followed by speech, and it's important for speech to have good vocabulary, good pronunciation, good intonation, and it's also very important to be able to tell a story. So good speech really does involve good storytelling, to be able to tell a story fluently and fluidly without rambling and losing track of what we want to say. This is followed by reading, and reading is broken down into two parts. Decoding, and in order to decode we must know the code, and this is followed by reading comprehension. So we need good memory skills for reading comprehension. We've got to be able to remember what we've read so we can answer questions and understand what we've read. This is followed by writing, and that in turn is followed by learning. So what do we need to have good listening skills, good speech, good reading, good writing, and good learning skills? Well, the foundation to all of this is good cognitive skills, and those are memory, attention, processing, and sequencing. So let's start by talking about listening first. When a baby is born, the brain is wired for language. If a baby is born into an Italian family and he's exposed to the Italian language only, he's going to learn only Italian. It's the same for a Russian child born into a Russian family, or an English child born into an English family. He will learn only English. And when we're talking to babies, we very often exaggerate our tones. So for example, when I used to greet my babies in the morning, I would say to them, "Hello, my little precious, how are you?" And my voice would go quite high and I'd exaggerate my tone because I was speaking to a baby. We all also break down words into monosyllabic words like, "Oh, mama is here," or "dada is here," to make it easier for our children to absorb little sounds, little words, and in order for them to repeat them. We also develop our babies' speech and their cognitive skills by teaching them nursery rhymes and singing them songs. So if we look at a simple nursery rhyme like this one here, Jack and Jill, this develops all of the cognitive skills: memory, attention, processing, and sequencing. We call them maps. So Jack and Jill went up the hill to fetch a pail of water. Jack fell down and broke his crown, and Jill came tumbling after. Now here, babies learn to process words that sound very alike. For example, Jill and hill, water, after, down and crown. Those pairs of words sound very alike, but there are a lot of words within the nursery rhyme that do not sound alike. So they begin to realise that some words sound alike and some words do not, or they process similarities in similar sounding sounds. They also learn the words in order, word by word, line by line, verse by verse. So they develop their sequencing skills. Then they have to remember the nursery rhyme. They have to remember it line by line, verse by verse, and they have to remember the entire nursery rhyme. So it's developing their memory skills. And while they're doing all of this, they have to pay attention. They have to concentrate. They have to learn the words, and that concentration is also developed. So when we start teaching our nursery rhymes to our little children of 2, 2.5, 3 years of age, it's having a great effect on building up those cognitive skills. Later in life, kids from about the age of 9 onwards, 80% of what they do in class is listen. So good listening skills are very important for taking in what the teacher is saying. So let's talk about what skills we need and how their importance for listening. I'd like to start by talking about processing speech. There are 2 parts to processing. There is the processing accuracy and processing speed. Students need good processing to distinguish speech sounds correctly. So that accuracy is very important to learn the rules of language and associate sounds with letters. If we look at a word here, for example, in class, if a child is listening to a teacher and he's been diagnosed with dyslexia and his processing ability is not as good as it should be, and his processing speed is slower than it should be, then he's constantly playing catch up with what the teacher is saying. He's not quite getting it as she's saying it. So let's look here at this slide and see what exactly I mean by that. Well, in this example, if the teacher says a word like say, and if we look here, this part of the representation represents the sound S, and this part represents A. And so if I process it at the correct speed at which it's said, I process the word say. However, very often with dyslexia, and I'm just using this word as an example, it could be different words, but in this case, if there's a gap between the time I process the S sound and the A sound, even if that gap is only 100th of a millisecond, I may process that word as stay or spay. It may seem like another sound has been put into this gap when in actual fact it hasn't. So the teacher has said say, and I have processed, because I have dyslexia and my processing speed is slower than it should be, I have processed the word stay. So now I've misinterpreted what the teacher has said, and I have gone off in a tangent, and it's not for a little while that I realise I am not getting what the teacher is talking about. I thought she was talking about something else. So by the time I come back to where the teacher is, I've lost my place. I have lost where she is. And so it's very difficult to pick up because I've lost a bit in the middle. So the consequence of that is I'm going to lose concentration. And the consequence of that is I'm not going to remember what it is that the teacher has been talking about in class because I didn't get all of it to start with. So that processing difficulty has a knock-on effect on the other cognitive skills. It's very important too to be able to process or differentiate between very similar sounding sounds. And sounds are made up of frequencies. So if we take these two sounds here, ba and da, they're very similar. They even look very alike. Now, the arrangement of the frequencies that make up these sounds are also very alike. So ba, for example, is made up of two medium frequencies, represented here by the horizontal lines, and two low frequencies. So you can see here these lines are pointing down. And da is made up of, again, two medium frequencies and a low frequency, just like ba. But here we see that there is a high frequency with these lines pointing up. Now, if, for example, I'm not able to process that high frequency in this particular arrangement of frequencies, then I'm going to register the same sounds, because to me they sound the exact same. And it doesn't matter how many times my teacher tells me that's ba and that's da, I'm seeing two different symbols, but I'm registering the same sound. And what we have to do is get back into the brain to build up that processing skill so that we can help the student to process the sounds accurately and to differentiate between the sounds. So building up that processing speed and building up that processing accuracy is a very, very important part of the program. In the program, the sound has been acoustically modified. It has been slowed down 4 times. So as the student progresses through the program, it will speed up to normal speech eventually. But he starts with sounds sounding very slow. So here it's stretched out to help the student process the sounds when the sound is slower. It's much easier, and research has shown us that it is much easier to train the brain to process accurately when we've slowed down the sound and then speed it up as we advance through the program. In the first module, our students will be working on all of the cognitive skills are being strengthened. So the memory, the attention, the processing and the sequencing are all being developed here in the program called Fast Forward Literacy. And most of your students will work on the literacy program. So in the literacy program, there are 6 exercises: Space Racer, Galaxy Goal, Spin Master, Lunar Tunes, Star Picks, and Stellar Stories. Now, Space Racer works on differentiating between high, medium, and low frequency sweeps. So the students have to figure out, did they just hear high and low? Did they hear low, high? So they have to figure out what they just heard. And this can be quite challenging for students with processing issues, but it helps to develop language comprehension. This exercise also develops working memory, so it helps them to remember what they've listened to and to follow instructions. And this is very, very important. The ability to follow instructions is crucial in the classroom when the teacher, for example, may give an instruction like, take out your English book, open page 45, read the first paragraph, answer the first 3 questions. Now, for somebody who's struggling with memory, attention, processing and sequencing, he is going to really struggle to take in all of that instruction. And it doesn't matter whether he's learning English or Italian, he's going to struggle with that taking in instruction. Now, here in these exercises, the program is developing the brain to access the sounds within the English language. And we see students improve in every subject, but here it's done through an English language intervention, an English language reading and learning program. So in other exercises, for example, Lunar Tune, a student would work on matching phonic sounds and phonic words, and it is also a memory exercise. So we see students spelling improve, their times tables improve, their ability to learn grammar improves. Anything that they have to remember, we see that these skills improve by working on exercises such as Lunar Tunes. Stellar Stories, for example, it develops the listening comprehension. Here they listen to English conventions, for example, grammar. They also, there's a lot of language comprehension in here, lots of vocabulary development. And so this is, again here they work on taking instructions, very, very good exercise for developing the skills, for taking in many elements to an instruction, not just one or two elements, but it goes right up to maybe 7, 8, 9 elements to an instruction. So here I'm using this graphic. It's from a younger child's program, but the graphics that all of your students will be working on are suitable for their age. They won't be working on this exercise. This is for much younger children, but it's just to illustrate a point. Now, this exercise develops processing, it develops working memory, and it also develops sequencing and concentration. And not just concentration, but we're also wanting to develop endurance and sustained attention, not just paying attention for a moment or two, but paying attention until the exercise has been completed. So here the student hears two sounds, high, low, and they have to decide which sound they've heard first. Was it high? Was it low? So they click on the triangle if it was high, and they click on the square if it was low. Here too, there's quite a gap. The sound has been stretched out, so there's quite a gap between the two sounds. High, low. Later, as they progress through the exercise, there is not the same gap. The sounds come almost immediately after each other, which would be the speed of normal speech. High, low. So they progress, they start off and they progress up to the higher level in this exercise where there's no gap between the sounds, and it can be very, very challenging for some students. Also in this exercise, they have to get 9 trials in a row correct. So every time they click the mouse, that's a response to a trial. So they have to get 9 in a row correct. That's very, very important. Accuracy is important and speed follows. Here, again, the graphics are for younger children, so don't worry about the graphics. We have the literacy program has graphics that are more suitable to your age group. But here the student starts off with very simple instructions. So touch the green circle, and again here the sound has been stretched out. So there are only 3 elements to that instruction: touch the green circle. But later little squares are introduced, little circles are introduced, and so the instruction becomes more complicated. For example, with the small green circle, touch the large blue square. Now, there are 8 elements to that instruction, and it's far more difficult to carry out that instruction than it is to carry out the first instruction. So all the time the working memory is being developed so that the child can, or the student can, take in more elements and more elements as he progresses through the program. Here in language comprehension exercises, students work on exercises or instructions or sentences. They might listen to a sentence, for example, a double embedded clause here might be, the boy who is smiling is pulling the girl who is frowning. Who's smiling, who's frowning, who's pulling, who's being pulled. There's a lot going on in each of these questions, and the student has to listen carefully to what he's just heard, and he's to pick out the correct picture which matches what he's just heard. So our goals are to improve processing, to sharpen phonological representation so that we understand and we get the phonemes and the phonics within the English language, enhance oral language, so enhance the listening and the speech. We want to strengthen reading, writing, spelling, grammar, punctuation. All of that is very, very important. And we want to create successful students, of course. So in summary, everything along the learning timeline, listening, speech, reading, writing, we need good memory, attention, processing and sequencing for all of these. In the first module that all of your students are going to work on, all of your teenagers, which is literacy, they will complete, by the time they complete that module, they will complete over 40,000 trials. That is an incredible amount of work. In the brain, when the student is working on the program, the neurons within the brain, or the brain cells, are firing. And from the repetition, from the frequency, your students have to work 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week. This is a very, very important part of the program, that frequency and that repetition. And through that, the neurons in the brain begin to make connections with each other. Those connections are made permanent and strong. And they don't break up. Once those connections are made, and once they're made strong, they're there forever. They don't break up after a while. So, as those connections are being made, the student will feel there will be a good factor feel to what, a sense of satisfaction when the child or when the student has done something right, when the connection has been made, when that synapses, that connection is called a synapses, when that has been made, there is a chemical reaction in the brain and the student does feel good about what he has done. Motivation is a very important part of the program as well, and within each of the exercises there is a motivation. Children, or students I should say, are rewarded with points every time they get something right, or there may be other little rewards or surprises. So for example, in this spelling exercise, if the student spells the word correctly, then he gets a squirt of ketchup or something like that in his hot dog. It's important too that teachers motivate their students and make sure that there's some rewards for them for their hard work, because they are working hard if they're attending every day and they're working for the 30 minutes every day, 5 days a week. Teachers can access their students' reports online. Here you can see that I've been working on literacy, just to demonstrate some of the reports to you. And here you can see that all of my lines are going up, so I'm doing well in all of the exercises. But if, for example, one of my lines was to plateau or it was to be horizontal, then I would have to have a closer look and see, well, why is that happening? Why is it plateauing? There are weekly achievement reports, and here you can see that I do better in other exercises, in some exercises, than I do in others. And these horizontal lines, the green at the end of each line represents my progress in the last week. Here you can see my scores for each day. So every day I get a score for every exercise I've worked on. And here you can see on Sunday I worked on 2 exercises, on Tuesday I worked on 3, Wednesday I worked on 3, Friday I worked on 2. So some days 2 exercises are presented for work, some days 3 are, and some days 4. But whatever is presented for work, then that is what I have to work on. I must work on everything that is presented to me each day. The exercises automatically time out, so you don't have to time your students. Once they start, the exercises will all automatically time out. Here we can have a look at the error report. So if we're worried about a particular exercise, a child or a student may not be progressing well in a particular exercise, we can have a look at the error reports and try and figure out why that is. It's important to work on the error reports away from the computer. So this work is done in addition to the 30 minutes on Fast Forward each day. And here it is important to read through the mistakes and help the student understand why he is making the mistakes he is making. To be a success, you must work at success. So we must have a plan. When Paola came to Cork, we had a computer lab. All of the students worked at the same time. They wore headphones, and there were certain rules. They had to respect their fellow students. They had to be quiet. And there is a calmness in the room. There is actually a lovely atmosphere in the room when the children and the students start to work on the program, because they become quite absorbed into the program. Now, it's important to timetable and have a schedule and set the plan and set the rules. It's important to show the students their reports. They love to see the reports, to see how they're progressing after all their work during the week. So, the cognitive skills, memory, attention, processing and sequencing, develop phonemic awareness, develop phonics, develop fluency, which is very important. The accuracy and speed at which we work is very important, at which we listen and read is very, very important. Building up vocabulary, and all of this leads to good comprehension, which is very, very important. So by developing all of these skills, we see that our students can access the English language easier. They can access reading. They can write more easily and learn better. So my story started with Luca and his listening. And now, having worked on literacy, we see that Luca will have his listening skills will have improved. His listening comprehension will have improved. He'll be able to process what's being said as it's being said, and he'll be able to remember it, stay with the teacher as he or she is talking, and concentrate in class and not become distracted or become distracting. Reading, we'll see that reading the decoding, he'll be able to access the rules within the English language, the rules that break the rules within the English language. For example, we start very simply by teaching phonic words, but in English, it's not like Italian, it's not transparent, the language is not phonetic. So it can be a little more complicated, and we move on very quickly from phonic words to words that, you know, are not phonic. So for example, if I ask a child to spell way, W-A-Y, and he might spell it W-A-Y, but he could also spell it W-E-I-G-H. Now, no matter how many times he sounds out W-E-I-G-H, which sounds like w, e, I, g, h, he'll never ever get it to sound like way. So we have many words in the English language that really don't, when we sound them out, they do not sound as they should. So we have to be able to learn the rules, we have to be able to learn the rules that break the rules, and we have to sometimes learn words as a whole, because breaking them down sometimes doesn't work. So learning the code is very, very important. And also fluency, the speed at which we read is very important, because if we're slow to read and we're caught up in the decoding, then we're not going to understand what we've read. For the working memory, for reading, if we read a word, for example, like cat, well, we have to decode it. We have to visually decode it. We have to see what's on the page, obviously, but also we have to process the sounds within the words, and we have to do that quickly. And we have to take it and match it to a picture in our memory banks, and we have to match the word to the picture of a cat in this case. So the decoding side of reading is very important, but also taking in what we're reading as we're reading. So that working memory is very important. And working memory is the memory that you are using now in the moment as you're listening to me. And when you go home this evening and you tell your partner or your friend about this presentation, you will remember quite a lot of it. But next week, you might remember a little less. In 2 months from now, you'll remember less again. But what's important is the memory that you use in the moment to absorb the information, to take in that information, is crucial to how much of it you remember. And we have to be able to take it in, transfer the information to our short-term memory and our long-term memory. And we need good working memory for listening, but we also need it for reading comprehension. So decoding, fluency and comprehension are very, very important for reading. Having worked on literacy, all of these skills will have been strengthened, so the child can, and the student, your teenagers, will be able to access the reading more effectively. Writing. With writing, we have to be able to process our thoughts, sequence our thoughts, decide which words we want to use to express those thoughts. We have to structure our sentences with a beginning, middle and an end. We have to use the correct grammar. We have to use the correct punctuation and spelling. So there's an awful lot going on with writing. Let's talk a little bit about punctuation now. The grammar and the spelling is very, very important, and we need good maps for both of those. But I just want to take punctuation and just talk about the importance of something as small as a comma. Here, for example, the bear eats shoots and leaves, full stop, means the bear is eating shoots and leaves. But in this case, the bear eats, and you will see here I've put a little comma, the bear eats, comma, shoots and leaves. That comma changes the meaning of that whole sentence. So now the bear eats, he shoots, and he leaves. We need good maps for listening and writing. Now, some of our students with dyslexia prefer to focus on just listening to the teacher as the teacher is speaking and not writing. But in some schools, students have to write, take notes, while the teacher is talking. In other schools, teachers will give the notes out to the students. But if a student has to listen and write, that can be very, very challenging. So after working on the program, we would hope that that skill, being able to listen and take notes, that skill would improve. So we started with Luca, and now he's at the end of his learning timeline, and he has improved listening, improved speech, improved reading, improved writing, and he's a better learner. And we have a saying with the Fast Forward program. The Fast Forward program, it's like a gym for the brain, and fit brains learn English better. Now, if you have any questions, these are my contact details, and I'm very happy to, if you'd like to email me or contact me, I'm very happy to talk to anyone who would like to get in touch with me. Thank you very much for your time, and I hope you have enjoyed the presentation.